All right, Rick. So I always like to lead with a question about your childhood. And I don't ask everyone about Ric Renner's childhood. I mean, your specific childhood. It would be odd if I asked everyone about Ric Renner's childhood. But when you think back to it, what are the things that stand out to you? And you can take in whatever direction you'd like.
Well,
But hobbies, interests, personality, what jumps to mind?
well, I was a military brat. My father went to the Naval Academy, played 1 year with Roger Staubach. He was a running back at Navy and went on to fly planes. And unfortunately, he died in Vietnam. And I was 4 years old when he died. And my youngest brother was just born, and my middle brother, was a year old. So there we were in Jacksonville, Florida, on the military base, my mom and three boys, 4 and under, and I instantly kind of had to be the father figure for my brothers, not knowing what the heck I was doing. And my mom was like our dad and our mom, so that's how we grew up. And I had a lot of family in New York, up and down the East Coast, in Florida, and just I grew up pretty fast, just without having a dad. So. But I think that was probably one of the things that shaped me the most is just being a kid and wanting to have a dad so bad. And I would play with everybody else's dads because I wanted that father figure in my life. And the guy that really ended up being the biggest father figure for me was my uncle, who is a fireman in New York City at Rescue 1. And, he's been through hell too. He was supposed to work on 9/11. He didn't. And he was on the bridges going home. He switched a shift with somebody, and the person that he switched his shift with ended up dying in the towers. So he has never been the same since then, but he has been such a special person in my life. I would go up to New York many summers and just ride on the truck while he was driving, the Rescue 1 fire truck around New York City. And most of the time we were just going on food runs and that kind of stuff. And, he took me to Yankee games and Met games and Islander games. And, he was the one that was really instrumental in getting me into being a sports guy and loving sports so much, and then I had a cousin who was a big-time disc jockey in New York City, and I wanted to be like him, so I used to DJ weddings, bar mitzvahs, divorce parties, which I think are the most fun, and nightclubs and stuff, and I would do kind of his secondary ones. He was doing big-time stuff. He's still a jock in New York City now, but that's kind of how I started in broadcasting, and then I was on my way after doing that and, DJing at all these nightclubs and stuff. And I took that act down to South Florida and, DJed at some places that would have 1,000 people in it. You could be a monkey and everybody would dance to you. It was easy down there. But that's how I kind of started my broadcast career. And I actually went to Syracuse, upstate New York, to be a DJ. And figured out that I could get really good seats to sporting events if I was a sportscaster. And there you go. I was on my way.
All right, so a few things to unpack here. First of all, I appreciate you sharing about, your father and that history. If you don't mind me asking, what, when you became, really old enough, and not that at 4 you didn't know what happened, but as you got older, how did you cope with knowing that you didn't have your father there with you, or what were some of the things that maybe helped you get through that bump in your life?
Well, I think in South Florida, growing up down there, you had two choices. You could get involved in drugs, unfortunately, in the neighborhood that I was in, or you could get into sports. And I chose sports. And so I would play sports sun up to sundown. I would sit on the basketball court. I'd sit on the racquetball court, the tennis court, and just wait for the next person to come play with me. And that's what I did as a kid. And, that's kind of what got me through. But I was always kind of looking for that father figure. But sports was what really got me through everything. And, and then eventually my mom moved us around a little bit. Even after my father passed, she felt like she was still in the military, so we were bouncing around from Jacksonville to Fort Lauderdale, and eventually we settled in Fort Lauderdale area, where I went on to graduate high school and stuff. But down there, we had so much fun just playing sports, and we lived on a golf course my middle school years, And, so I just would bag balls and, walk around, caddy and all that kind of stuff down in Doral and some of the other courses around Fort Lauderdale. And that's what I did to just kind of get through the time and not really having that father figure. And I was that father figure for my brothers growing up. But basically, I took that on myself because that emptiness that I didn't have, I tried to provide to my brothers.
All right, so, Rick, you go to Syracuse, and I guess I just assumed, which we know what happens when you do that you went to Syracuse because of the rich broadcasting tradition there, and you went there full on wanting to be the person you are today. But I guess you just shared that maybe wasn't the case. So this as well as I do. It's cool to maybe the hook to get into broadcasting is the idea of getting a credential and being able to go to these games. But to actually follow through and pursue it as a career, it's got to be deeper than that. What is it about sports broadcasting for you that hooked you early on after beyond just the surface stuff of the credential and that has kept you for, multiple decades now doing what you're doing?
Well, I always looked at sports as that was my true love. I mean, that's all I did. I was one of those kids that I was good in everything, but not great in one thing. Looking back, I wish I played one sport and just stuck to it. I had a great opportunity playing golf and having free lessons and all that stuff, but golf back when I was a kid wasn't cool, so I didn't take advantage of it. And I probably could have played, I think I had a really good shot at basketball being 6'5", 6'9" with hair. I figured I had a pretty good chance at that. But when I went to Syracuse, I really, I knew about the broadcast legends that came from there. Dick Clark, Vanessa Williams was in my freshman English class. I remember that when she was going through the whole Miss America thing. That was kind of interesting when we were in school. Michael Tirico was a year behind me. And he, there's so many broadcasting guys, Ian Eagle, the list goes on and on, Ted Koppel, Dick Clark, Ric Renner, all the big names. But, when I was there, think about the years. I mean, I graduated 88. That was the heyday of the Big East Conference. You had John Thompson, Patrick Ewing at Georgetown, Louis Carnesecca and Chris Mullen at St. John's. Villanova was great. They won the national championship there. Syracuse got to the Final Four and lost to Indiana on a last-second shot my junior year in 87. And football-wise, under Donnie McPherson at quarterback and Coach McPherson, we made it all the way to the Sugar Bowl, and Auburn tied us. We had a chance to win the national championship my senior year. Moose Johnston was on that team as a star running back along with Tim Green and some of the other guys. So I was there at just a great time, to be covering sports, and we were so good, and we and the broadcasting development there was incredible. You got to do play-by-play of all the games. I mean, it was a little interesting. I mean, there was one year that this is like I just got cleared, and we're doing Boston College. And, I'm on one plane, and my color guy is on another plane. Well, that other plane didn't make it because of a snowstorm. Who would have thought that in Syracuse, right? A snowstorm. And we get to Boston College. I memorize all these guys' numbers. I'm nervous as hell. I'm looking down at my rundown, and right before the game, Boston College decides they're going to have all new uniforms. And so I looked at that, and I'm like, oh, my God, what am I going to do? So I figured out the guy in the middle was named Rodriguez, and I just decided in my mind Rodriguez was going to have the game of his life because he was the only guy I knew. Just Rodriguez to Rodriguez the slam. And I got through that and was able to do all these big-time games. Michael Tirico and we did lacrosse together, and he's a Michigan guy. And we had a lot of fun with that because the two of us didn't know anything about lacrosse, so we kind of covered it like a hockey game. And whenever there'd be a break in the action, we would just throw it to commercial because we had no idea what was going on with the restraining box and all these rules they got. So, but you had to do lacrosse before you could get to football and then eventually get to basketball and do play-by-play there. But I think that, the Big East was flourishing at that time. Syracuse was so good with Derek Coleman, Roddy Cycli, Dwayne the Pearl Washington, Sherman Douglas. I know there's some names that people will remember. I know Sean Elliott remembers them because I think he never beat Syracuse when he played them. But, just throwing that out there, I like to remind him of that. Although P.J. Carlissimo tells me that he has a winning record against Jim Boeheim, and I still need to take a look at that and make sure that that's true. But I just fell in love with sports, and I figured, man, if and like you, because I know you have such a passion for it, once you realize, like, wow, I could actually make a living doing something that I truly love, and then I was on my way. The only thing is, it took me a little while to get my first job. My first job out of school was Macy's, working in the women's shoe department at Herald Square in New York City. And the first time I got on TV was the Thanksgiving Day parade underneath Snoopy. And while I was underneath Snoopy, one of the guys on the motorcycles ran over my foot on national TV. That was the first time I ever got on TV. So I was very proud of that. One of those Shriner guys with the hat and everything. But, and then eventually my first job was in Lafayette, Louisiana, $12,000 a year, move yourself. And I went down there and did that. And the other sports guy quit when I got there. So the news director said, hey, you're probably going to be on the air for a little while. That little while turned into 4 months straight of me being on the air. Basically, I felt like I was held in captivity doing sportscast every single night and making $12,000 a year. I had one jacket and 2 ties, and I used to take paper and take a magic marker and color it a different color and put it in my pocket as a different pocket square to make it look like I had a different outfit. Basically, that jacket was smelling so bad at the end that, I think it could have actually done the newscast by itself. So, but that was my first job in Lafayette, Louisiana, and then I went on to moving all over the place before I made it to the great Fox Sports Southwest and being involved with such a great organization like the San Antonio Spurs.
All right, so and I definitely want to get there. Before we really move on to that part, you mentioned your dad played football with Roger Staubach. Roger's pretty, he certainly is not hidden in the Metroplex. He is available, and I'm sure over your time you've crossed paths with him. And I imagine that, that connection has been made. I'm just curious if you got any good stories out of Roger or what maybe those conversations have been like with Roger, possibly about your father.
Yeah, and, it was during the there were a lot of times where I'd be in situations where we would be interviewing Roger, and it'd be a scrum with 100 guys, and it really wouldn't be a great opportunity to talk to him. But when the Gulf War was kicking up, we were doing a bunch of war stories, and I got to go to his office, and as you know, Roger has a big-time real estate company, so we went to that company that's located near the Galleria in Dallas, and I was able to get one-on-one with him. So I wore my dad's ring into his office to see if he would recognize it. And as soon as I walked in, he goes, "What is that? Let me see that." And then I showed it to him, and he goes, "You're Beef Renner's son." I knew it, because they used to call my dad Beef. He's bigger and stronger, a lot bigger than me. Looks a lot like my younger brother, who's a police officer down in Fort Lauderdale. Yeah, so then, we talked a little bit, and he was telling me how my dad was really well thought of. My dad was Mr. Football on Long Island. They had that up in New York. He went to Oceanside High School. So in 1955, he was Mr. Football for Long Island, Suffolk County, and Nassau County when he came out, and then he went to the Navy, the Naval Academy in Annapolis. And Roger said it was really weird that he wore the number 55 and was a running back. That was always the weirdest thing. But he goes, he could have played linebacker. He goes, he just was that big and strong. But it was really cool to catch up to Roger. And through my journeys of working in television stations in various markets, I've been able to meet other people that knew my dad, which has been great because I've always longed for stories about him. In San Antonio, there's been a few that are retired military that went to school with him or were stationed with him, which was really cool to catch up to those guys. And one of my markets was Pensacola, Florida, which is where all the Naval Academy guys go first for flight school. It's the home of the Blue Angels. And I was working there for a year, and man, it seemed like every 3 or 4 months someone would come out of the woodwork and they knew my dad and had another story, and it's just been so much fun to hear those, because I literally personally do not remember any stories about my dad, because basically he would come back, get my mom pregnant, and then he would go back to war. And his story is that he was shot down in a concentration camp with Senator McCain, was able to survive that, came back, and they were going to send him to the Pentagon. He was a lieutenant commander, but he wanted to go back to Vietnam and get some of his guys in his squadron out. And so he went back and he crashed off the side of an aircraft carrier. And an interesting story about that, not to get super long, but my mom's kind of thing in her life that she's always wanted was some kind of recognition for my father. And they never put him on a Vietnam memorial. They never did anything for him. They never found his body. He and his co-pilot both had 3 kids under 5. And there was no recognition for them because they weren't technically killed in Vietnam. They were technically killed over the water, and they never found their bodies. So this is crazy. One of my cousins was in Washington, D.C., and just for the hell of it, looked my father's name up, and he had a stone in Arlington Cemetery, and we never knew about it. And so then 29 years later, we went back there, and Senator Kerry from up in Boston, Massachusetts, he was part of a thing for military vets and their families and stuff. He basically did a folding of the flag ceremony for my dad 29 years later, for my mom to experience that. And through that, so the local newspaper, when I was working in Jacksonville, actually did a story on me and how they, just because I was a so-called celebrity in Jacksonville as a sportscaster, but they grabbed onto that to tell that story about how the military had such bad records back then. When guys were dying, they didn't know about their families. They didn't know about any of that stuff, so they didn't know how to get in touch with people in their family. So they would have all these salutes and these ceremonies for guys that died in Vietnam, and none of their families were even there. And so they did a story on that, and it got picked up by USA Today. And I would say for the next 5 years, I got letters from families that had the same exact story, which was just heartbreaking to hear all that. But it was really cool for my mom to kind of go through that and get to have that ceremony many years later. And after that, he ended up getting on the Vietnam Memorial in Jacksonville, Florida, because he was stationed there, which is right outside of Alltel Stadium where the Jacksonville Jaguars play. So that was kind of cool, and it's kind of been a place that, we go back to all the time and check it out, and obviously go to Arlington to see his stone there. And he also has a gold chair in the athletic facility at the Naval Academy, which we didn't know about. So that it's been kind of crazy to find out about all that stuff, after the fact, but a lot of other families have gone through the same thing.
That's amazing, Rick. And again, I know I mentioned this earlier, but I appreciate you sharing, your stories and experiences involving your father, which, I'm sure is not, always easy to do. Hey, Rick, growing up here, I would watch you on TV and I'd think, wow, this guy's got like all the energy in the world and holy smokes. And it was really cool when I actually met you, because you are the exact same, and I think people can hear this through this conversation, but some people are a little different on camera and off, and that's okay, but you are the exact same person on camera, off camera, whatever. You have a passion and an energy that is so unique, and because of that, I think your broadcasting style is definitely unique. You definitely do not blend in, and I guess I'm curious, where does that come from? Where does those personality traits, the energy, I would even say the willingness or the lack of reservation to just put yourself out there and not be afraid to be goofy even. Where does that all come from, and how did that develop for you?
I think that, just because I had that DJ background, where you're the one guy at a wedding and you got to make everybody happy, and enjoying that and just having the energy for that. And I think that's kind of how it all started for me, and I transfer that over to sports. And in my journey, as you know, you have news directors and general managers and people. They're always trying to change you. Like they see your resume tape and they go, "Wow, that guy's so fun. He jumps out at me. It's crazy. This guy would be great here." And then you get hired, and then they're like, "We got to calm you down. You need to sit on your hands. You need to, wear conservative jackets and ties." And it's like you go through some of that. And it's funny because, when I first started, maybe I did too many nicknames and this and that. But I get it because, basically people want you to be successful, but they want you to kind of reach all people, because some people may look at you and go, "This guy's a clown. It's too easy to do that. He can't give me the serious story. He can't give me that. He's just he's the crazy guy." So you need to appeal for everybody. And it's like, that's always been kind of a constant balance of, being entertaining and having fun, but do you have the credibility to deliver the tough story too? And, I feel like I've gotten better at that over the years. But, when I first started, it's just, I love sports so much, and I can't wait to tell people about it. A lot like how you are, like your radio show, you're one of those guys, if you're a guy or a girl that wants to be a sportscaster and you're growing up in the Alamo City, I would listen to your radio show every day, because you're the kind of guy that's always going to give me something that I didn't know about. And there's a lot of other guys that, they just read papers and they repeat stories and that kind of stuff. But you're one of those guys that stimulates ideas and stimulates, a passion for sports and other angles to why things happen and why the Spurs won, why they lost, why the Cowboys did this, why are they making that move, why they drafted this guy. And those are the things that are interesting to me, and I think that I have such a passion and an energy to deliver that to people, a lot like you are on your radio show. And, that's just me, and I'm having fun. I can't wait to do it. It's been so tough with this, with the coronavirus and everything that we've gone through with the shutdown of our country and sports. And yeah, I get it. But boy, I've just missed sports so much, and it just feels like we're missing something, and we can't wait to get back to it, and everything getting back to normal.
I appreciate the kind words, Rick. But I'll tell you, like, one of my challenges as a broadcaster is maybe achieving what I was just asking you about, and feeling that comfort to just be me, and that feeling of, hey, if I make a mistake or if I try something and I come off as goofy or whatever, like, not a big deal. And so I always love hearing from people like yourself, for whom it seems like it comes so naturally, and there's clearly a degree of creativity that you possess. I'm curious if you wouldn't mind sharing with us a little bit about the Ric Renner alter egos.
Oh, like Rico Suave, pumping
Exactly.
wattage into cottage homes and homes and megahertz up the skirts, Footloose and Fiance Free. Those were my DJ days. When I first started, when I was DJing, I would do these different kind of radio stations. So, just to try to, and that's what I always tell young broadcasters: do as much as you can. Don't limit yourself. Do news, do weather, do whatever you got to do. One of my jobs was in Tyler, Texas, where our weather guy left and went to Austin, and the news director came up to me and said, "Hey, we don't have anybody to do the weather, so you're going to have to do weather and sports." And I'm looking at her going, "Well, I don't know anything about the weather." And she's like, "Just look in the newspaper. Who cares? He gets it wrong all the time anyway, so why not?" So I would do, like a 9-minute sportscast and like a minute weather, forecast. And my forecast, I would always say, chance of rain, but I never told you what the chance was. There'd be tornadoes and all kinds of stuff going on in East Texas, but not my weathercast. It would just be, chance of rain, and so I would do like the shortest little, weathercast, and then get into my sports. One night, we had this bit, and I know this is kind of a left turn here of your question, but one night I'm doing sports, and sports-wise, this is talking about my alter ego. I was Ric Renner. That's my real name. Now, I had some news directors that changed my name a few times. Like in Louisiana, they wanted me to be Cajun French, so I went to Rico Renner instead of Ric Renner to sound French. but I'd be on the air mispronouncing all the Cajun names, Mercy Buckets very much, Bobby J. Herbert or Herbert Bear, not sure if it's Bear, so I'm running around with all that stuff, but it was pretty obvious that I wasn't Cajun French, but, we had these consultants come in, and they're like, look, this would be great for you, you'll get to New York, you need to be Rico Renner, we're going to give you a perm and dark hair to make you look French Cajun. And then I'm like, okay. And then meanwhile, I got the blonde hair coming up through the black curls, and and I'm mispronouncing all the names. It's not really working. But one night when I'm in Tyler, Texas, I'm doing sports as Ric Renner, and then to get to the weather, they would throw up this pretty weather shot, like a shot of a waterfall or flowers or something, and they would put the temperatures over it. Well, I don't see it until I'm on the air. And so this guy shoots these 2 cows in a field on Billy Bob's ranch in Tyler, Texas, and the cows are just doing their business. They're going number 2. Of course, I don't see this until I'm on the air. And when I first started, whenever there would be mistakes in these small markets, I would just try to make a joke and go on, and try to get through it that way and make fun of myself. So I'm doing the sports as Ric Renner, and then I would, I'd say, coming up next, it's Rico Renner and the weather. And then they would take the shot, and you see the 2 cows doing their business. Well, while they take that shot, I would switch my jacket to a crazy colored jacket. So I had a pink, with gray lapels jacket. I'd put on glasses with no lenses. That's for credibility, but you don't want to have lenses because you don't want to have the reflection of the TV cameras in the studio. And then I put on a French beret and a stupid accent. So I'd look at, oh, Lord, take a look at our current temperatures. And I look over and I see the 2 cows doing their business. And I'm like, well, apparently we're going to get dumped on tomorrow, so bring your umbrella. And I start laughing. And this station was so rinky-dink that half of the station was in a mobile home and the other half wasn't. So whenever it would rain, it would get really loud in there. So you'd have to scream, and then the newscasters, they would be behind the camera shooting me, and when they were on, I would be shooting them. So we were never on the set together. So our main news anchor is behind the camera, and he's shooting us, and shooting me, and this whole weather thing's going on, and he can't stop laughing. So the camera is shaking up and down, right? And I'm laughing, and I'm sweating. I'm like, hey, man, this cow, I don't want to milk this anymore, but we need to get off this shot. If we could get rid of their legs, they'd be ground beef. I'm making all these jokes and stuff. So eventually we get through the sportscast. My station manager sends the tape to America's Funniest Videos. I get a trip to New York, and I'm up for the grand prize of $10,000, which was almost my salary. So I go up there, and I'm up against a kid that hit his head on a diving board and a chihuahua chasing its tail, and of course I lose to the chihuahua chasing its tail. But I got a trip to New York, and I met Dick Clark, so that was kind of cool. But that also ages me a little bit. But that was the thing, like, when I was growing up and getting into this business, I would bounce around to different radio stations. So, I'd be on a top 40 radio station, and I was Reckless Ric Renner. I would be on a national NPR station or an easy listening station, and I would be the overnight sensation. And you'd hear, beach noises and girls screaming and stuff. And so I would do that and try to get myself on as many things that I possibly could to get the experience, to get better, to work on your voice and feel more comfortable. And that's kind of what I did in the early days, and that's how I had all those different names. Luckily, I've found a home at Fox Sports Southwest, and I've been here for 20 years, no need to change my name, although people call me some names, but, I'm able to stay with the same one for a long time.
All right, Rick, last thing I got to ask you about, your passion for high school football is really neat. And, I think, a lot of times people, they want to broadcast at the highest level, and you certainly do. I mean, you do stuff with the Rangers and the San Antonio Spurs, so, you're certainly not at a shortage for those opportunities. But a lot of people might think of high school sports as a stepping stone or something that, they'll do for a little bit, but eventually they want to graduate beyond that. Well, we're in Texas, and so maybe it's a little different here. It certainly is different here. And the work that Fox Sports Southwest does in promoting and covering high school football is greater than that of networks covering the NFL in certain markets. So I guess that might play a role. But your passion for high school football to me is incredible. How did that develop, and why is it so special for you?
Well, it's funny you say that because, like our executive producer, Jason Walsh, and this goes back to our old general manager, John Heike, and Mike Anastasiou. Heike is in the Texas High School Coaches Hall of Fame for being the guy that was instrumental in trying to get one site, for all the state championship football games. But Jason has said that he treats high school football like a professional sport. And, we have, like NBA-wise, we do out of Dallas, San Antonio Spurs, Dallas Mavericks, New Orleans Pelicans, Oklahoma City Thunder, the Dallas Stars, and we do all of them out of here. In the past we had the Houston Astros. Obviously we have the Texas Rangers, and, we have some Big 12 product. But we have always treated high school football like, a professional sport. And that's the thing. It's been that way since day one for me. Growing up in Florida, I thought high school football was the best in Florida, but then I got here and I found out it's not. I mean, think about six-man football draws more fans at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, than the highest classification of football in the state of Florida. Now, Florida has a lot of amazing athletes. There's a lot of great speed, and you could say the same thing about California, but it is nothing like it is in the state of Texas. And when we first started doing, things at Fox Sports Southwest in 2000, I got there from day one, June 1st, 2000, and I had a feature that we did in Jacksonville, Florida, where we would spend the whole day building up a big rivalry game. From the pep rallies to the dinners to the barbecues to all that stuff leading up to the game, the speeches from the coaches and all that stuff. And we called that the big game of the week. And then I brought that concept here to Texas, and I thought it was amazing in Florida. It was nothing like it is in Texas. And when we first started that, Craig Way would get with me, and we would be going out to Ira Ann, way out in the middle of nowhere, and, go out to Lubbock, El Paso, and all these great cities in Corpus Christi, San Antonio, the major cities in Houston, Dallas, and Austin, and then going way up to the Panhandle and all these places. And when you see football the way it is in those small towns in Texas, it is just the most incredible thing. And there is nothing like doing a Friday night show where you highlight all the best games in the state of Texas. We know people play those games. You go to some of these little towns, there'll be 20,000 people at a game on a Friday night. And we know the stories of Friday Night Lights, but there is nothing more amazing than that experience, and thinking that, if you wanted to rob someone, it would be on a Friday night, because everybody's going to be at that football stadium watching the game. And that's the part that I love the most, and the fact that people are able to, go to those games, enjoy those games, and then come home, shower, go to their local, Dairy Queens and Jack in the Boxes and all that kind of stuff, and then watch our show. And that's the essence of what high school football is like on a Friday night for us, and we have so much fun with it. And it's an amazing amount of research that I do, because I never want to get a kid's name wrong. I never want to mispronounce it. Is it Brahmas or Brahmas? Something happens in Waco where everybody goes from Brahmas to Brahmas, and then you go out east, you got is it Coyotes or Coyotes, and some of these nicknames, the purple, sand crabs and all these nicknames and stuff. You think about Refurio and the Bobcats and that little town and how great they've been for so many years, and then all the way up to the big powers like Duncanville, South Lake Carroll, Allen, and Galena Park North Shore, who's gone back to back. And I just love the stories. I love the kids, and I love to celebrate them. And it's definitely a passion, and it's something that I love more than anything we do. It's right up there with Spurs championship basketball. It's so much fun for us.